An Order of Ember, a Warcraft self-insert, by Elwyn. Blessings 1. I held my hand over the gash on little Gordon's leg, breathing in deeply and letting the magic that diffused the air into my lungs. Out here it held a tang of wind, of freedom, and whispers of far distant places. Not enough to tell me anything, but enough to remind me of how windswept the headlands could be. It was a beautiful place, but also unforgiving. "Hold still a moment," I said, putting my other hand on the boy's leg to keep him in place. He nodded nervously. Derek, his father, was looking on, unhappy yet still letting me work. Even small wounds could fester if left untreated, and while this was unlikely to cost him his son, pragmatism and love had overridden his distrust and fear. It was strange to me just how little people trusted magic. They were in a world filled with it, flooded with it, and yet they acted as if it were unnatural. Mama and I weren't quite shunned, but definitely weren't welcome after we'd done our work. Some witches settled down, took roots in one spot, while Mama chose to always be on the move, to look for and find new people who needed help. My very first memories, or at least those I could properly recall, were watching the countryside slowly roll by from the comforts of my mother's back. Even as a child, a baby, we still traveled. Mama only stopped to resupply, provide assistance to the villagers and farmers we passed, or to feed me. I couldn't recall much of those early years, and most of what I did were more put together pieces of imagination from Mama's stories, regaling me of my strange behavior as a baby. Sometimes I wonder if I should tell her I was reincarnated, that I had lived a life before this one. With our beliefs, our faith, being what it was, she likely would believe me. It certainly would explain things for her. Green light coalesced in my palm, the small wreath of yarrow flowers I kept around my wrist puffing up, and I could feel small tendrils from the still living plant questing for the wastage produced by my mediocre casting. I didn't mind. It helped in its own way. With a deft pinch and flick, I popped off one of the flowers and crushed it. Yarrow was associated with healing. Aspecting my magic, though I'm sure those taught more formally would call it something different, was much easier with a medium. Yarrow were plentiful and fed into the beliefs of the people we helped. No one would think we cursed or poisoned something with a yarrow flower. Slowly and carefully I pushed the magic into Gordon's leg. He'd cut himself open on a rock chasing after a runaway goat, tripping and falling while it pranced out of his reach. Why it happened didn't matter much to me. He was a boy of 7, a little over a year younger than me, and he was hurt. That was reason enough to help. The wool and milk we would get in return for healing him, and blessing his mother's herb garden, were just good extras. Everyone who wasn't a light fanatic knew to keep the harvest witches happy, even if they kept us at arm's length. It reminded me of Discworld and Granny Weatherwax in some ways, except with far more actual magic involved and no headology, distant memories of another life. His bleeding slowed, then stopped, and I took a handful of boiled water mixed with a little alcohol to wash out the wound. No good would come of leaving dirt or grime in there when I was done, even if I could just will away any possible disease. I should be able to do that, but I couldn't. I didn't know how, nor did Mama, and the experiment I tried once went badly. None of the other witches we had met while traveling knew either, nor had they heard of magic to remove diseases outside of what the priests did, and for various reasons I hadn't exactly been able to ask them. When it came down to it, harvest witches weren't druids, and not really. For all our powers were so very similar and came from the same source, there wasn't the same heritage behind it. We hadn't had a demigod decide to gift us knowledge. What we knew was hard-won over millennia of trial and error. "Ouch!" Gorgon yelped as I ran the water through his wound, his leg kicking out and hitting my chin. "That hurt!" "And it didn't hurt before?" I poked him in the stomach. "Stay still or it'll hurt more." His father was gripping the handle of his gun more tightly after his son yelped. I could feel his gaze on me, and it didn't feel good. He didn't hate me, I had to remember. He was just worried for his son, scared the magic would go wrong like on all the stupid stories. With another pulse of magic, energy flowing from me to him, his skin began to mend, the flesh underneath pulling tight and closing up, and the gash steadily zipping up from both ends. It took a few scant minutes. More time was spent on convincing them to let me, and preparation to work, like boiling the water, than actually healing him. I was getting faster. There, done. I stood up and brushed off my skirt. Now stand up. Gordon was slow to get to his feet, still favoring his right leg over his left, but with a lack of pain he was quick to go back to standing normally. It doesn't hurt at all, he murmured, looking at me with an odd expression for a few moments, before realizing I was looking at him back, and turning to stare at a wall. Shake it for me, hop on one foot, I told him. He glanced back at me, then to his father. Do as the girl says, boy, Derek ordered. He hopped, but on the wrong leg. I rolled my eyes. No, the other foot, Demi, I told him. Derek stifled a laugh as his son switched feet and hopped, his face turning crimson. I soon told him to stop and turned to his father. See, he's fine, just as good as a priest. Derek let out a long sigh of relief. Thank you kindly, miss, but I don't trust them priests much either. Always preaching about the light of theirs, not thinking much of how we got here in the old days. The headlands were part of the most backwater, out-of-the-way parts of Galneas. Inhospitable as they were, it meant they were sparsely populated, and those that did live here had done so for hundreds, thousands of years, from before the founding of Galneas, from before the Troll Wars and Arafor, from before the Church of the Holy Light was a dream in anyone's mind. They remembered the old ways that my mother and I practiced, and spoke the old tongue as well as the more normal Ghanaian one. It would be a rare individual who spoke Lordanian common in these highlands, cut off and distant from the industrializing nation in the lowlands. Though they didn't know it, they retained much of the history and culture our Vrykal ancestors had taught us so long ago. I gave him a white, beaming, childish smile. I hope you think better of us than the mages at least. Derek stared a moment before snorting. We do, aye. They'd be worse than the preachers for sure. He paused for a moment. There be a few of me flock that haven't been doing well of late. Do you think you and your ma could take a look at them? I closed my eyes, feeling for my magic. I was still a child, stuck with childish endurance, eager and flushed with energy to muck around and play right up until I wasn't. But for now, even after that bit of magic, I felt fine. I really was improving. My initial thought was to immediately accept, but that wasn't right. Even if helping was within my power, and something I wanted to do, he shouldn't be asking me. I'd have to ask Mama, but I can do it, I replied carefully. I'll go see her. Mama was busy with Derek's wife's garden. It was wilting. We both knew why. They were getting wrecked by the wind up here. They needed more protection after some twit had cut down the copse of trees that had sheltered the house and garden. A bad day might even damage their cottage with how open everything was. We'd plant a few trees in good spots before we left, give them some encouragement to grow so the flock didn't eat them right away, and that'd be a more long-term solution. It wasn't something Mama had done before I suggested it. There used to be trees all over, but with cutting them down for firewood and so on, a lot were gone, and it wasn't good. Winds like this meant soil erosion. I might not have been a farmer or anything in my past life, but Mum, my previous mother, had been obsessed with permaculture for a while. You picked some things up whether you wanted to or not. I found Mama doing exactly what she was supposed to, while chatting with Derek's wife about their children, namely me and my antics. Mama, I yelled, interrupting them. I never liked it when she told the story of how, when we got a room in one of the better coach inns which had indoor plumbing, I'd been so happy to not have to use the stinky outhouse or piss into a chamber pot that I had to be dragged away. It happened. I didn't regret it. I still held the idea of a toilet up as a major aspect of civilization, but she didn't have to tell everyone we met. Mama, Derek asked if we could help with some of his sheep. They haven't been doing well. She let out a small puff of air, a smile telling me she knew why I interrupted her, and beckoned me over. Everything go well with Gordon? She asked. I nodded. Uh-huh. His leg's all healed, no infection, no dirt. He can walk again already, hopping on one foot and all, ready to chase after a goat and injure himself all over again. Gordon's mother, I never caught her name, chuckled. Boys are always getting into trouble. I give it a few weeks before he has a new bump. Girls too, Mama said back. Sometimes I think little Gwen learned to do what she does to cover up her mishaps. I only burnt myself once, and you startled me. It had taken over a year to figure out how to get rid of the burn scar on my leg from when I dropped a pot of boiling water. It had hurt so bad. It was gone now though, as were all the other little blemishes, covered up by freshly grown skin. I don't get hurt that often. I crossed my arms over my chest and pouted. Once is enough, my little blessing, Mama said, reaching over and pulling me into an embrace. I shouldn't have reminded her of that. She couldn't heal, not the way I did. She was good with plants and herbal medicine, but using magic to heal? It was beyond her. My abilities were an anomaly, an aberration. I had picked things up so quickly Mama barely had anything left to teach me when it came to magic. A few scant rituals and rites to do with astrology rather than plant life, animals, or the world around us. And she only hadn't taught me those because the stars were only right every few years. There literally hadn't been a chance yet. It frustrated me to know there was so much more I should be able to do. I was clearly talented with druidic magic for some reason. I could hear the whispers of nature through magic. I could feel the health of things just by being nearby. I could near enough understand any animal just by trying. But I didn't know how to turn into one, how to call plants to entangle my foes, to do healing from afar or more effectively than my clumsy and slow attempts. The witches and old ways hadn't survived well the encroachment of the arcane and the holy light, driven to the frontiers and fringes, spurned and ostracized for being other. Not outright hated, rarely hunted, but we weren't welcome. The fear and distrust up here in the headlands was one of the best welcomes we'd had once our nature was known. About the sheep? I asked Mama when it was clear she wasn't letting me go anytime soon. We need to be in Kill Harbor by the full moon if we're to meet my friend, Mama told me. We can't stay long. The full moon was only a week and a half away. It was going to be a long walk to Kiel. Then we can take a look at the sheep, see if there's anything obvious, but that's it. I offered a compromise. Sounds fair, Derek said, having followed me to the garden. I don't wish to impose, Lady Witch. It was a mere thought. Mama looked to Derek, chewing on her lip briefly. Alright, if we find anything at all, even if we cannot fix it, you'll grant us another spool of thread. At least you would know what was ailing them. Derek grimaced unhappily, but nodded. Aye, Nebbin's one of me best rams. If in that your price, it'd be a worthwhile one. 3 skeins if you can cure him. On top of what we already agreed. Mama nodded, and she put a hand into the soil. As I felt a faint but well-practiced pulse of magic begin to spread, I joined her. Janice, you need to give these ones more shelter. She pointed out the more wilting herbs, including a small patch of silver leaf. Put up a wall of some sort. The wind is stealing their water and killing them. We'll be planting a few trees, fruits and nuts that grow well here before we go, but they will take years to break the wind. With my magic added to hers, it wasn't long before the plants stood tall, proud, and looked as if they were ready to blossom at any moment. For a few moments, Mama stared at the plants as if surprised they had recovered so quickly, before standing up and brushing the dirt off her hand. She held it out to Derek's wife, who was suddenly tense, standing amongst the herbs. She took it carefully, gave Mama a single shake before letting go as if she might get bitten. Good tidings be with you, Janice, Mama said calmly, not paying heed to the disrespect she'd been given. Come, Gwen, let's go see these sheep. This is better wool than I thought he'd give us, Mama says, rubbing at the skein as we trudged down the road out of the headlands. Derek had kept his word and given us 3 spools, or skeins, of woolen thread after he found out what was making his sheep sick. They'd found and started eating a patch of mage royal. It wasn't poisonous, but it did cause problems. Something to do with the excess mana in the plant. Most of his flock are simple Merin sheep, but this is Mistthorn wool. I looked up at my mother from the mage royal I was playing with, idle curiosity evident on my face. His goats were Mistthorns, the same ones his son had gotten hurt chasing after. Mama answered my unvoiced question. They don't produce much wool or part with it easily, so most folk keep them for their milk and hardiness, but it's much finer and magical. We'll be saving this for something special. Nodding excitedly, my mind drifted to the various things that someone with the right skills could make with the tailoring profession. Not that the game reflected the world all that well, but it made one think. I wasn't looking forward to weaving the cloth though. My mom was still teaching me to knit and sew, but it was time-consuming work. Nothing was automated yet, not even the carding. It made clothes expensive, every last scrap of cloth valuable. The idea of 20 bolts of linen selling for pieces of gold on the auction house was strangely accurate, though Gilneas used more wool than linen, and had tiny amounts of silk production coming out of Stormglen. Spider silk. It made me not want anything to do with it, but at the same time, silk small clothes would be a massive upgrade over what I had now. People who lived modern lives forgot just how much work went into making things before the Industrial Revolution. I didn't have shoes. I had foot wraps Mama prepared for me, made so she could stretch and grow them with my feet, adding more slips of leather for the sole, because buying shoes as I grew was far, far beyond our budget. The same was true of clothing. We wanted the thread to mend and expand things, not so we could make something entirely new. Mama, I piped up as we crested the hill. The great expanse of the headlands laid out in gentle slopes before us all the way down to the Bight. Keel Harbour was a small blotchy speck on the landscape, only noticeable due to the change from greens to slate greys. I thought I could see specks of white sails out on the water too, but it was a long way away. Who are we meeting in Kiel? An old friend of mine. We haven't spoken since before you were born, but... Mama trailed off, her expression turning sour. But... Mama, I tugged on her sleeve. Don't get sad. You said they were a friend. Yes, they are. A good friend and talented witch. One who helped me learn what little I know. Maybe they can teach you more, she said bitterly. I certainly can't. I opened my mouth to say something, to tell her off for being down on herself, but I couldn't find the words. Mama wasn't as good at magic as I was, even though it was most of her life. It couldn't be easy being surpassed by a child. I still had so much to learn from her, all the life skills needed to live in this world, from cooking on an open fire, to naming and knowing the plants that were useful, from those safe to eat and those that were poisonous, the customs of Gilneas and what part we played in them. But in what had been her life's calling, she had fallen behind. Even if it was by her own daughter, it couldn't be easy. Love you, Mama, I eventually said, putting my hand in hers. She smiled sadly down at me, squeezing my hand. I love you as well, my little blessing.